Welcome to Bridging Gaps, the business podcast sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of Bridging Gaps, the business podcast. I hope you've enjoyed the break over August, and I'm really excited to be bringing you a whole new lineup of guests for this season. Joining me for my very first episode for Season 2 is James Thompson. James is the managing director of the award-winning Spokes of Bagshot, which is a bicycle shop which, as you might guess, is located in Bagshot. James is also the winner of the Institute of Directors Director of the Year Award for 2017. I met with James on a sweltering hot day in July, and we sat in the actually rather lovely cool comfort of Spokes of Bagshot. The interview is a little longer than most of my interviews. We're touching on the sort of just under the hour and a half mark, but having looked at it, I can't see anywhere that it makes sense to cut the interview, and I think that you'll really enjoy the conversation that we had. It really does give you an insight into James and to really get to know him, the challenges he's faced, and where he's going. So please join me in welcoming James to the show. So hello, James.
Hello, Deborah.
Thank you very much for joining me, and I'm really looking forward. Well, one, it's great to be in your bike shop, not just because it's nice and cool, but to be surrounded by all the bicycles is fantastic. So thank you for letting us do it here.
Welcome.
Thank you. So James, if you could just start off maybe by telling me a little bit about Spokes of Bagshot and where you are now in terms of the business and how you started off with Spokes. That would be great.
Okay, so we are just over 3 years in. We opened in March 2015 after a long sort of struggle with securing the property, and we're 3 and a bit years in now. We've gone through some challenges, some really exciting times, and here we are. We're an award-winning local independent bike shop that's got some pretty ambitious growth plans. Great team around us, and we've got a established place in the local community that's growing and growing. And we're very excited to still be here and hopefully with a bright future ahead of us.
So how did you come to choose Bagshot for the location?
Bagshot chose me.
Okay, who called you?
Yeah. So there's a long story behind this, so I'm glad that we've got an hour. But
I've got a sofa, I can have a nap if need be.
So I used to work for another shop for about 11 years. There's one in Caversham in Reading, pretty established, proper bike shop. And I tried to leave on various occasions. They didn't let me, and I had a few other opportunities in finance and selling vending machines and various other things. But my big opportunity happened when I decided to do an Ironman triathlon. So in 2012, I did a relay bike leg of Challenge Henley, which is an iron distance triathlon.
Okay.
And I got to the finish line and waited for my marathon guy to come in, and we finished together, and we all got the same medals that the guys that did the full thing got. And I thought, you know what, I really do not deserve this medal. I was watching the guys that did the full thing that came in, and I was just amazed, inspired, and just blown away by these endurance guys. I'd never done anything like this before. I thought 112 miles on a bike was pretty far, and I asked about 10 of my friends who did triathlon, do you think I could do this full thing next year? 9 of them said no, and 1 of them said yes, and she was the person that I listened to. And at the start of that journey, I couldn't really swim. I could do a bit of holiday sort of bobbing around, breaststroke, and she taught me how to swim, and she got me up to a standard where I could do more than a length of a 25 metre pull. And so the journey started, and I met a guy in the old shop that I used to work at, and he was training for the same event. And so we decided to become kind of training buddies, and we basically did the first triathlon together, and he finished 12th and I finished 13th. And that's the point that we thought, you know what, like, we really need to do things together. Like, we're really close in terms of ability. And so he became my best friend, and we spent pretty much every non-working moment of the day together, much to our wives' dissatisfaction. And he's a pretty successful, affluent guy. He's a property developer from Reading, and he introduced me to two more of his friends, and they ran together every Wednesday. And I'd met Simon a few times, and we'd kind of like learned more and more about each other as we were out on long bike rides and runs and things. And he invited me along to one of his Wednesday runs, and I'd met one of the guys, Rob, a few times, and David was away. He's the third guy. And I eventually met him at one of the Yateley 10K running races that we all did. And I told Simon my kind of life story and what my plans were, and I'd written this business plan to open my own bike shop. And he excitedly introduced me to David that evening at this 10K running race. And he was really excited to introduce us because earlier that day, David had put an offer in on this Bagshot property. He stood opposite it and said this would make a great bike shop. And he owns Brackenwood Windows, which is a big regional windows and doors company. He has no tie-ins to the bike industry or anything. He just stood over the road and thought, this feels like a bike shop. And he was purely buying it as a property investment. And Simon was like, you guys need to talk. You want to open a bike shop. You've just basically bought a bike shop. And to cut a really long story short, the property acquisition process for David took about a year and a half. And I nearly gave up, like properly nearly gave up, and went and had a career in finance in the city, which I'm really glad I didn't. And he eventually called me to tell me that he got this deal, and that's how Spokes was born. So
it's amazing, though, that just the right place at the right time with people who happen to be thinking the same thing. With no reason to be thinking the same thing or even to necessarily to know each other. It's fantastic.
There's so much synchronicity in the Spoke story, I can't even tell you. Like, there's so many little memories and things that have happened that just make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up on end. Like, the moment I properly gave up on the Spoke stream, so after that run, David and I scheduled a meeting for the following week, and he's got a small plane. He's got a little aeroplane that he flies himself, and we had our first meeting about Spokes of Bagshot in Cornwall over a genuine Cornish pasty, and then flew back. We shook hands on this kind of fag packet deal.
As you do, it's popped out of Cornwall for a pasty, and then
And it was kind of like a Dragon's Den type deal, really. So he put he put probably about 90% of the money in for 50% of the equity of the business. Right. So we're 50-50 partners. He was really heavily involved in the setup of Spokes, and he had really enjoyed the creative process of designing logos and kind of setting up the company and being there for some of our crucial first meetings and help negotiate some terms and things. And then as time's gone by and I've grown in my own experience, he's still very much there in a mentor capacity, but he's really backed off and is there as a sort of a silent partner. So, but while the property deal was rumbling on, like, it just felt like it was slipping through my fingers, and I was getting a bit despondent in my current job at the time. I was thinking, I need to get out of here. I've had this massive carrot dangled in front of me, and I really want something different. Like, I can't focus on this with this here. So I called up a friend of mine who was he's a vice president for Barclays Bank, actually. As a pretty senior guy. And he's always been a big fan of me and what I've done for him before, and always said, look, if I can help you with your career, just give me a call at any point and I'll try and place you or help you in any way I can. And so I made this decision that, you know what, like, I wanted a career in finance, I wanted the city life and all of that exciting stuff. And so I called up Sean and we had a long conversation. I told him everything about the Spokes opportunity, and he said, you know what, that's the perfect thing for you, but if you want to do this this city thing, then we can talk. Like, there's a few places that I can put you. I'll have a conversation with some people tomorrow. I was like, thank you very much, Sean. I really appreciate that. I hung up the phone. You could have counted to 30, and this is God's honest truth. 30 seconds passed. David Medcraft calls me. And I'm getting hairs in the back of my neck standing up right now, just telling the story.
I have to say, so am I.
David calls me. I hadn't spoken to him for about 4 or 5 months. I thought Spokes was a dead duck. And he said, James, look, I'm sorry to call you out of the blue. And I'm also sorry for doing this a bit behind your back. But I've renegotiated the terms of the Bagshot property. I'm going in with 2 of my friends. We bought the shop next door, which is now Primal Roost, and all of the office space above. Which we're going to make into 6 flats. They've accepted our offer. We get the keys in September, and I just remember bursting into tears. I hung up and I was just completely overwhelmed by what had happened. Like, you know, I literally had given up on the whole thing, and then 30 seconds later it was back on, and we went full force from there. So,
which is absolutely amazing, because there is a point, and I think this is true for a lot of people, again, starting up or trying to get their business going, is how long do you believe in it? How long do you hold on for it to make that change, to either come into being or to, you know, to actually to start making money, to start turning it around. And so I can fully understand you thinking, well, actually, this is just never going to happen. I need to do something else. And then for that,
I think I think that's a really good point, Deborah. You know, my business journey has taught me so much about patience, and I'm probably the most impatient person you'll ever meet. But you know, nothing comes round as quick as you'd hoped, and everything takes more time, and it's always 10 times harder than you think. But you know what? When you get to these milestones and these points, they're even more rewarding.
It's that. Well, it's being able to hold on. And I think it's also something about the people around you. Because sometimes, especially if and I know I've experienced this as well, and still working to get to where I need to be. But of course, people around you worry. And so they're questioning on your behalf and with your interests at heart. And so having that belief in yourself and saying, no, I need to keep going down this route can be really difficult when everything around you is saying, no, you need to do something different.
That is so challenging. And I think that's one of the things that I've really learned is, I don't like to use this word about myself, but as an entrepreneur, and I'm starting to use that because a few people have called me that, and I don't believe that you should ever call yourself one, but I'm starting to feel like I am an entrepreneur now. And you're right, you know, for every one person that believes in you, there's 10 people around you who pick your ideas apart, full of negativity and criticism. And it's almost like people want you to fail, because for whatever reason, maybe they haven't succeeded or tried at a goal that they've wanted to achieve. And, you know, they're very keen to suppress the dreams of others.
And I think sometimes as well, it's their background. So for me, I've always been, I think I've had one proper full-time job where I was actually an employee. Mm-hmm. But the rest of my life, I've been a contractor. So while I might have stayed in companies for a long time, there's always been, in my mind, a freedom to leave. So it doesn't matter, you know, there's contracts and all of that. Whereas I think that if you're in a permanent job and you are working and you're employed and you've got the pension and all of those things around you, they provide a safety net, which may be false, especially in the market these days, but they still feel like it. And so people find it difficult to understand when you're in a different situation and how you can not have that safety net that they feel like they have. So I think there's sometimes that where they just don't get it.
I think you're right, and I think there's a positive change going on around the perception of entrepreneurialism, and I've been fortunate enough to go and talk at some schools about my experiences setting up my own business. And I remember talking at Gordon's school just over near Lightwater, about following your dreams, and the fact that you don't have to follow this set path predetermined by your parents or by the academic rule book. And I'm someone that decided to leave education halfway through college, and I remember my grandparents were quite disappointed in me for that. And if I'm totally honest, and without getting a little emotional about this, it's been a big driving point in my life, because just seeking my grandfather's approval, and I've just worked relentlessly to show the world, and specifically them, that I could make something of my life before he died. And when he died, or just before that, he did say that he was proud of me. And like I said, I'm trying not to be emotional about this, but it's really given me this inner fire. And sometimes you have to go against the grain, and going against the grain sometimes gives you that fuel in your fire to achieve great things. And I think, had I followed the normal academic route, and I'm not against academia at all, and for a lot of people it works, but there's a lot of people that go to university now just to get a university degree, which is no relevance to their life, and they incur a lot of debt, and perhaps they don't really know what they want to do when they go there, and their dreams change and their goals change by the time they leave, and that's fine. Everyone's got their own paths and journeys. But I really want to help encourage that message, that you don't have to go to uni to make a great success of yourself. And one of the most successful people I know, one of the guys from the Wednesday runs actually, he left school at the age of 14 and he couldn't read or write.
Oh, wow.
And he never sat an exam in his life. And he worked on his dad's pig farm for a few years. And he set up R. Collard Limited, and he is one of the most successful, affluent people I know. And he is just the true definition of an entrepreneur.
And there is something about that in terms of, and you hear it a lot, so even I interviewed Richard Woods a month or so ago, and then another woman, Alison Edgar, and they're both dyslexic. And I believe Richard Branson is as well. And there is something about school's not for everybody, whether it's because of dyslexia, whether it's because of something else. And being good at school doesn't actually define whether you've got skills, whether you can be successful. It's finding that path that is right for you.
Yeah.
And when I look now, and I look at somebody, who's doing building work or something, and I think, well, actually, I might have previously been thinking, well, they're just a builder. But now I look at it and think, well, actually, they have to know so much to be able to actually make sure that my neighbors have just had some work done and put a dormer window in. I've been very focused on building work. But it's all the things that they have to think about. You think there's actually so much skill that goes into pretty much everything you do. And it's finding the ones that really, I guess, make your heart sing and make you think, yeah, actually, I love doing this and I'm good at it, or I can become good at it. And education doesn't necessarily have to be the only path to that.
I think there's a lot of good things that come from education. You learn a lot of key skills, some communication stuff, obviously, reading and writing, and I think it encourages you to explore a few avenues and help define what you are good at and interested in. But I don't think it's the predetermined path that it used to be.
Yes.
And people are realising that they can be very successful by forging their own paths. And I'm really encouraged by that.
So one of the other people that I've interviewed, she'd gone to university, but came out of university, and she said, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So she was just kind of hanging around, was the way she phrased it. And then the university held an evening for people like her who were essentially not sure what they wanted to do. And the Princess Trust was there. And they really, she realized she didn't want to go into a job. She didn't want to go through, she'd studied media. And she didn't want to go through working for somebody else and starting off doing, all of the stuff that wasn't of interest. And she started her own business, and she's doing absolutely fantastically. And, so she went through some training with the Princess Trust. They gave her a loan as well. But it's just finding that path that's right for you. And for some people, going into the job is the right thing. And it's just whatever works for you is what you need to do. And sometimes you have to try multiple things until you find it.
I think you're right. And I think, we're always learning. And I think that willingness to learn and be open to opportunities and saying yes to things, it's always so built into us to kind of treat things with a bit of an air of caution. And since I've opened my own business, I'm so much more susceptible to just running at things and saying yes and worrying about the technical stuff later.
I'm sure it'll work out somehow.
Confidence and humour gets you into and out of a lot of trouble.
So how did you, because the way you described, when I was reading some about this, you described this as a high-end bike shop, and that you want to be different to some of the maybe more maybe older bike shops that have been around for longer, that sort of thing. And I'll be honest, when I walk past here or drive past, the impression I get before I'd even come in is actually very different to other ones that I've driven past. So there's a definite feel of, I don't know actually, I'm not sure if high end is the word, or just that it looks like you know what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. He did not pay me to say that.
Yeah. Well, I think high-end is appropriate to the retail experience that I want to give our customers. And don't be put off by that, because we do try and cater for every type of cyclist. So one of the inbuilt mottos that I kind of threw around when we were forming the company was, we can sell you your first bike to your last bike and every bike in between. And we really do want to be an all-encompassing, welcoming shop and community hub. So I don't want people to look at us and think, oh, they only sell £11,000 bikes, because whilst we do that, I'm equally as excited about the 5-year-old kid that walks in for the first time, just beaming ear to ear about getting his first bike. And to us, the kind of high end is about the retail experience. We're all about the personal customer service, using merchandising and retail kind of skills and methods and techniques that other bike shops just completely overlook. And I'm irritated by the bike industry and quite frustrated at how old school their approach to retail is, and this is something that I'm trying to change. And I once famously asked a rep to leave because he was an hour and a half late. He was dressed in sandals and cut off jeans and had surfer dude hair, and I just thought, you know what, you're trying to win my business, you need to treat this industry with professionalism. And if you were going to go and picture a 40 grand's worth of business in a boardroom in London, you'd be wearing a suit and tie, you'd turn up on time, and you treat it like a proper industry. Whereas so many people in our industry treat it as this lifestyle kind of environment. It's all very laid back, and don't get me wrong, I love a lot of aspects about the kind of community and feel-good factor that cycling embodies. But this is a great commercial business opportunity, and you've got to treat it as one. If you're a bike shop owner, it's not about standing around drinking coffee and tinkering with gears all the time. This is a proper business, and I'm excited by that.
And do you feel, I know you said that you started off, that you were cycling, but then you started doing the running as well when you did the triathlon.
Mm-hmm.
Do you still see yourself as a cyclist who, it logically led you to, I would have a bike shop because I like bikes? Or do you think that, as you said before, that you're an entrepreneur and it happened to be that you've got expertise in bicycles, and that those two just joined together, but one way or another you would have ended up in some sort of business.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it. And if I say one way or another, if I say it's because of the commercial business opportunity, then I sound like a capitalist pig in many people's opinion. But equally, I see it as more than my passion and my love. I do have a great passion for cycling, and I've done a lot of cycling. I've done many great things with cycling, and met so many people. Like, without cycling, we wouldn't be here. It's not like I've just kind of put my finger in the air and said, okay, how do I want to make loads of money? Let's open a bike shop. This is my area of expertise. I've worked in the industry since I left school, and I work in the industry because I love cycling. But I see it as a commercial opportunity. And, I could have gone into finance and made a lot of money that way, but I see this as a greater opportunity than hedge fund banking or, market trading.
Well, and it's a very different one, because this is about people. So ultimately, yes, you're selling people bicycles and equipment to go with it, but it is about the people. And I get a strong sense from some of the information you sent me that you really do passionately want to build up a community and to have that feel of the people, and that it's not all about the, as you said, tinkering with a bike, or even about the commercial aspects of it. It's the people.
And you know what, like, that for me is the most rewarding part of the job. And I'm fortunate to say I love coming to work. There's a guy that always stands out to me, and I always recount this every time I'm kind of talking about Spokes, but there was a guy that came to us, and his name's Bernard. I hope he doesn't mind me mentioning his name. But he came in because the doctors told him that he would die if he didn't cycle. He actually did die. He had a heart attack, and he was brought back to life. He was an overweight HGV driver for the Royal Mail, and he basically had this heart attack. Doctor told him this pretty catastrophic news, and he chose cycling as his way to get fit. And he came in, bought a bike, didn't see him for a little while, and it completely transformed his life. He was happier in every aspect of his life. He'd obviously lost a ton of weight. I think he lost about 7 stone or something. And he had a new lease for life. He walked taller, he had more energy, he was just a happy guy, and you could see it. And like, the amount of time that people come in and they're nervous about buying their first bike, like they've signed up to do a charity bike ride, or the London 100, which is happening this weekend, and there's this trepidation, this nervousness, and they're entering this whole world that they know nothing about. And you give them the passion and experience and years of joy that cycling's brought us, and to see them leave nervous and then come back in a few weeks later and a few months later, and they've achieved their goals and they're hooked and gripped, and that's so wonderful. And I really love that, and it's the reason I do what I do, fundamentally. And the amount of interesting people with different life stories and backgrounds is incredible. And one of the things that I've always said is that cycling is a great leveller. And one of the things that I've always encouraged here and really pushed hard from the start is just doing Sunday bike rides. So 10 o'clock every Sunday, we put on a bike ride. We always put on free coffee and cakes afterwards. It's about 2.5 hours. It's normally about 45 miles. And so it's at a pace where you've got to have been cycling for a little while, but it's not off-putting to someone that's fairly new to cycling. And I remember the first time that we had this bike ride, there was only 6 people. It was on our kind of opening weekend. And they were sat around in the coffee area, we are now, Deborah, and they were chatting amongst themselves, just pretty small talk. They're all a bit nervous about going out. Some of them had bought bikes on our opening weekend. And they came back just with this energy. And they were just bouncing off each other. They were talking about going riding in the week. A lot of them were saying, oh, we work from home, and exchanging numbers, and they've become friends. And these friendships still stand like 3 years later, and they've gone off and done cycling trips together and ride religiously every Sunday. And we've had guys that work in Tesco's and multi-millionaires out on the same ride. And you know what, like none of that matters. It's just people interacting with each other and doing something they love.
As you say, it just breaks down all the barriers. It's not about anything apart being on your bicycle or whatever it is that you're doing that brings you all together.
Yeah, and some great business has happened off the back of it as well. Like I've actually got a team of ambassadors, so I've got probably 10 guys now, all from different walks of life, and I've sponsored racing teams in the past, and if I'm honest, I find them quite low value marketing exercises, because you've got a sponsored cyclist, they're surrounded by other sponsored cyclists, and it's a pretty small interest level, unless it's the Tour de France, but I can't afford Chris Froome, so...
He's still out of your league,
yeah.
maybe in a few years.
But the guys that I've got are quite interesting. So I've got a film director, 2 racing car drivers, an artist from South Africa, a guy that's climbed Everest, a professional adventurer, and now a golfer who was an ex-professional and is making a comeback to the full professional circuit next year. And he came in and he's looking for a bike, and like he offered us his services. He's really impressed with us. And he's like, I want to document this journey of going back to professional golf. You know, if you do me a bit of a deal, like I'll kind of share you guys on my social media. And so these are the kind of interesting people that we have really kind of pushing our message out there. And we do kind of evening talks and seminars, like particularly through our quieter season in winter. We'll clear all the bikes out in the shop, put up a big screen, and they can do a presentation and a talk about their life and achievement and their journey. And some of these evenings have been absolutely brilliant. We've even done art exhibitions in here before.
Really? Wow.
So,
I can't believe I live around the corner and I've completely missed this.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are like we've got a really growing customer base, and a lot of these things are quite sort of invite only. We don't often throw a lot of these things out to the general wider audience. So yeah, it's part of the perk of being a Spokes of Bagshot customer. You get invited to these really.
Sure, I can buy something.
Yeah. You might
coffee,
get an invite
please.
now, Deborah.
But that's really neat, because that is, again, involving the community and, you know, your customers, and bringing them together in something that is beyond the cycling.
Yeah.
So it's sharing, you know, the other interests that people have as well. And, well, because you do yoga in here as well.
We do.
I don't know if you do. But
I did for a year, actually.
Okay.
I can do that crow pose, which is the one where you stand, where you put your hands down and you cross your legs and you support your weight just with your hands.
Wow.
I never thought I'd be able to do something like that.
I'm very impressed.
My flexibility is even lower than my patience. So but like the Stephanie and her yoga, which happens here at 8:15 every Saturday morning till 9:15 before we open. Yeah, it's amazing. I really felt the benefits of that quite quickly, and learned a new skill. But it was quite amazing. And yeah, we could normally get about sort of 15-20 people along to that. So. And
so do you do that again? Do you clear some of the bikes away, or is there a space where you?
It's a bit of a faff on a Friday night, but we clear out.
To be honest.
And on Saturday mornings, but yeah, we clear out all of the first half of the shop here.
Okay.
And they come and put their yoga mats, and they use some like scented oils and things. So it smells wonderful when you come in here on a Saturday morning
I can imagine
to work.
anybody coming into the shop going, okay, I didn't expect the bike shop to smell like this.
Well, it starts off your day pretty zen.
Yeah,
So
it's a mellow start to it. And how do you find, because you said you've got that range of clients in terms of, you know, the people who need the super expensive bespoke, or want possibly need, may or may not be the right word, but then the 5-year-old coming in for their first bicycle. Do you find that people have any preconceptions, that they assume that because you do one you can't do the other, or do you find that just because as you've been growing, that people know that you're going to cover that range?
That's an interesting question. I think, maybe people do have perceptions. I've always wanted the store to feel welcoming to everybody. And that's to make it to a standard where at the high end, it feels high end, and it feels like a quality establishment. You've got some really nice things on the wall. But then I've noticed that other high end shops feel really intimidating to people that don't want the top end stuff. And so we don't want to alienate any customers. One of the most off-putting places I find for my own shopping is going into kind of jewellery shops or department stores, like makeup sections. When you walk through them, you feel so intimidated. They're just so clinical and clean, and you've got all these bright lights everywhere, and you just feel your own imperfections everywhere. And they're such sterile, quiet environments. And we always make a point of playing music in the shop, and I've really noticed that when you go into another retail shop or space and it's just deathly silent, and I think it adds energy and an atmosphere to the experience. And I know I'm going off topic a bit here, but the perception thing, I think you walk into a lot of these other shops and you feel intimidated to be there. One of our key growth areas at the moment is actually women's cycling.
Right.
That's going through a staggering growth phase at the moment, and people are either getting it very right or very wrong. And I've seen the opportunity of women's cycling from very early stage, and I feel this is a really relevant part of the conversation with everything that's going on with the Me Too movement and stuff at the moment. And, being such a historically male-dominated environment, it's quite an intimidating thing for a woman to come in, an environment to come into, because usually bike shops are staffed by men, and it's kind of like a gritty workshop, and you've got guys ogling over you and stuff, and I'm conscious of that. So we always try and have a really professional environment. Our women's section, in fact, this is an interesting fact for you, up until last year we'd sold more women's bikes than we had guys' bikes.
Oh really? Oh wow.
It's slightly tipped the balance now, but there was that, and that was a big number. We deal a lot with Liv, who is a new brand formed by Giant Bicycles, which are our main brand. They're the biggest producer of bikes in the world.
If I'm not mistaken, you're one of their top, or is that Stork?
No, we're one of theirs as well. So we're kind of pretty up there in terms of independent dealerships. But yeah, for Giant Bicycles, they're the biggest producer of bikes in the world. They own 80% of the factories in Taiwan that make about 90% of the world's bikes. Oh, wow. And they came out with this Liv brand about 3-4 years ago, pretty coincidentally with the opening of Spokes. And I knew that women's cycling was a massive growth area then. And so we decided to go strong on female cycling. And so we've got a big female area. Liv bikes have females designing the bikes, manufacturing them, branding, styling, marketing. So they look right, they fit right, they feel right. And we've got this soft approach to female cycling. And we're really conscious of how intimidating it can be.
So how do women find you? So Bagshot obviously gets a lot of traffic that sits and goes nowhere on the A30, but not necessarily coming through. Are they finding you through the advertising for Liv and showing you as a stockist, or is it word of mouth?
To be honest, Deborah, it's mostly word of mouth, and I very rarely spend money on marketing now. And we do. Social media is kind of an amplifier of word of mouth, really.
Yes.
And I'm a firm believer that when you impress a customer, the power that has to exponentially grow your business is phenomenal. And there's an old adage that, if you upset a customer, they'll tell 11 of your friends, and if you impress them, they'll tell 4. And we've been really reliant and quite successful, fortunately, with keeping our customers happy. On the whole, we can't win them all.
No.
But, they do tell their friends about us and spread our message. And it's got to a point where I'm starting to do a referral credit scheme where if someone comes in and buys a bike and they recommend a friend who then buys a bike, I'll give the original customer a £50 store credit to say thank you for bringing that business in. So there's a bit of an actual incentive to kind of keep growing that business in their own little networks.
Well, which is actually really nice, because quite often I think people, they'll happily refer you, but they also don't necessarily think about it. Because I know sometimes somebody's mentioned something to me and I think, oh, well, I actually knew somebody who could have helped you with that, but it just hadn't crossed my mind that I knew. Whereas if you've got that extra little, oh, actually, if I do that, I'll also get 50 quid. So it helps you and it helps me.
Yeah,
and
it's
it
a
helps
win-win.
the shop. That's right. It's all round. And
So this year I took 3 of our top customers on a special trip to Germany, where they met Marcus Stork, who's the founder of Stork Bicycles, went for a bike ride with them and had dinner with him, and he gave us a factory tour of their headquarters. And so it was a great little trip, and I'm trying to really reward our sort of top customers. And I'm going to do something similar next year, but I'm actually going to put in a caveat to that and have our 3 top spenders, but also our top kind of, what's the word I'm looking for really? So, influencer. That's the word I'm looking for. Where somebody has put, not necessarily, like they could have spent £5 with us, but they've bought all of this business into us. And I want to say thank you to that guy. So they feel really rewarded and even more encouraged to do it. So
yeah, so it's not about you have to have a certain amount of money to be able to spend in here. It's that, well, it's that community thing again as well, isn't it? It's actually, I might have only spent £5, but I really liked it. They were really nice. I've referred lots of other people, and wow, they recognise that. Makes a big difference.
But I don't want people to just refer us because of a kind of a small monetary value or a trip or something. I want it to be credible and people to recommend us because they really love the experience that they've got here. So
well, and I think with this sort of thing that I don't think people would refer, if you were rubbish.
yeah,
I don't think they would, even if they were, if you were giving them a £50 voucher, they're going to think, well, I don't want to go back there anyway. I don't really want to be associated with it. So I don't think, in my view anyway, that you would end up in that situation where people were only referring for that reason. I think there would be that desire to be part of your success as much as anything else.
On that point, you've just made me think of something actually. And one of the things that I find really difficult is we really rarely know when we've got something wrong. I mean, if we got something really badly wrong, people often flap and shout about it, and justifiably so. But if we do something slightly wrong that irks somebody a bit, they often just don't come back. And so I try and build relationships with customers, with all of our customers, to a point where I hope they're honest with us in the way that if we haven't done something wrong, right, or we've got an opportunity to improve, that they tell us about it. And I think that's something as consumers we should be doing more of. And because I'm in retail and I own my own business, I'm super analytical of how other people deal with me when I go into their establishments. And I think as a business owner, I'd rather know if I'm doing something wrong and I've got an opportunity to fix it. So,
well, and exactly, I went into I met somebody for a coffee the other day in Chobham, and the guy, when we were leaving, he said, how was everything? Did you enjoy it? And, we both said yes, it was lovely. And he said, would you mind leaving us a review on TripAdvisor? And, but if there was a problem, would you tell me and give me a chance to fix it? And I thought, well, actually, that was really nice, because he didn't actually just say, oh, you said it's nice, go leave me a review. He'd actually flagged that if we did have a problem, please tell him about it.
yeah.
So that he had the opportunity to fix it and to deal with it.
That's a good way of looking at it, because people will go, well, actually, you know what, like I wasn't that impressed with the way that you did this, or and maybe it's not so much that it annoys them to the point of saying something, but it's that little bit of critical feedback, because when you're tunnel vision doing what you do all day, every day, you often don't think that you're doing things wrong or that you're upsetting your customers, and it's something that we want to learn and change.
Well, and sometimes you use a term. I said to somebody, I was at a network lunch the other week, and I said, oh yes, I'm doing podcasts, and she said, oh, what are podcasts? I said, oh yes, that it just hadn't crossed my mind. that I didn't necessarily assume that she would listen to them or, have in-depth knowledge, but the fact that people didn't know what they were just hadn't crossed my mind, because everybody I'd spoken to up until that point either hadn't admitted that they didn't know or knew. So you start using things that they're so normal to you stop knowing that other people don't know them.
And I think that's really relevant in our industry as well, because we use so many kind of technical buzzwords and things, and because we're surrounded by them all day, every day, we presume that everybody else knows what they are.
Exactly.
So I do really kind of reiterate to our staff, you've got to tone it down sometimes and presume that nobody knows anything, everybody knows nothing when they walk in the door, and then adjust your kind of dealing with them as you would know that they understand more.
Yeah, because there's nothing worse than being spoken down to. But equally, there's nothing worse than being, so if somebody's explaining something to you using very simple words and you're going, yeah, actually, no, I understand. And they're not getting that message that actually you're at a similar level to them. But equally, if they don't understand and you're just speaking at this level. So it's a very delicate balancing act to read that person and to also see that sometimes I can't think of an example because it's been a long time since I've done anything with bicycles, but I might be going, oh no, I know what that is, I know about the gears, I know about the brakes, I know about these things, and so then you're starting to think, oh yeah, no, she knows what I'm talking about, and then you move to another level, and that's the point where my knowledge actually fades, and so for you to be able to read that is really difficult, and to make it easy for me to be going, oh actually no, hang on, you have just gone over my head. And now I do need the explanation. So it's a real skill, I think.
And I think it goes deeper than that. Like, since I've always been into sales, and I love the sales process, and I'm fascinated by the behavioural science behind it as well. And I've studied some pretty intense, deep stuff about persuasion and influence and people's behaviour. And there's so many different types of people out there, and the way that you interact with your customer really has to be tailored to the different profiles of people that walk through your door. And if you don't understand about the kind of profiles of people and the differences between people, you're not going to learn to successfully sell to them. And also, basic stuff, but just listening to people and really trying to get as much information out of them as possible in an efficient way so that you can better understand what they really want and how you can solve their problems.
As you say, rather than assuming that you know what they want or what might be a fit, because the last person who seemed like the same type of person as them wanted X, and it's actually, no, hang on, they want something different. Or even if they only think they want something different, because quite often you need to deal with, because I've noticed this in business as well, so on a very large scale, a lot of companies that I worked in, you would have R&D going, oh no, we're different, we're completely different to the rest of the organization. We are the most important part of the business.
Yeah.
And the sales guys would be going, no, we are completely different. And we can't possibly, and yet there are huge numbers of similarities. And one of projects I worked on at one of large company, they had two very different divisions, and they were absolutely stunned when we brought them together. And they were like, oh, we're kind of the same. And so recognizing that when people sometimes need to feel that they're different, even if they're not, and equally sometimes they are different, but I'm not quite sure where I'm going with that one.
No, I understand what you're saying. It's about treating people as individuals, and everybody, like we were saying with people's career paths and things, everybody has a different story and a different journey and different desires and different needs, and you cannot treat every customer the same. But then again, we treat every customer with a consistent level of respect. And we've had a member of the royal family in here, and we've had someone that works at Co-op in here, and I'd like to think that we treat the guy that works at Co-op with the same dignity and respect as we treat a member of the royal family, and vice versa.
Because ultimately, everybody, we're people.
Yeah.
And deserve a certain level of respect no matter what you do in life.
One of my favourite quotes, my mum used to buy me some really weird books when I was a kid, and I remember I must have been about 11 or 12, and she'd always seen this kind of business side of me. And I was fortunate to live in Thailand and India when I was younger. I lived in Thailand when I was about 11, and then India when I was 13 and 14. And they were quite formative years in my life. And they had lots of markets there, and I always just loved going and haggling over the price of a t-shirt. And it was just something that I found to be pretty good at. And my mum will tell you that I used to bargain with her over how many mouthfuls of food I would have as a toddler and things. So negotiations, negotiations been in my blood forever, and I love it. But she bought me this book by Julian Richer, who owned Richer Sound.
Oh yes.
And I've forgotten 99% of the book, but this one quote really sticks out to me, and it said, "Treat today's cassette customer as if they're tomorrow's hi-fi customer." And I've never forgotten that. I learned that since I was about 11, as I say, and that's gone all the way through my retail career, and I've always had that at the back of my mind with everybody that walks through the door.
And it's so true, because you don't know where somebody's going to end up, and if you've treated them well, and also I might be your cassette customer, but I might know the guy who wants the hi-fi, and therefore I'm going, well, actually they were great in there.
Yeah.
And so you just don't, because I had somebody call me a few months ago, and they said, oh, we were calling because a lot of businesses want to do this sort of thing, and I said, well, actually for me that's not appropriate right now, but I actually do know other, I'm in contact with other people who it might be relevant for. So if you want to send me some information, I'll pass it on to you. And he hung up. And I just thought, I've actually just offered to do your job for you.
Yeah.
And all you've seen or heard is me saying no. And it was really interesting that he didn't get that I was going, not for me right now, but I know other people.
Yeah.
Give me info and I will actually talk to them. So
it's pretty close-minded, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I guess it is that, well, actually, you're not interested in buying cassettes, so I'm not interested in you. And very close-minded.
Yeah.
So if we go back a little ways.
Okay. Rewind.
But we're going a bit forward from when you were in India and negotiating how many peas you were going to have as a toddler and all of this.
Okay.
But I know that when things started to move ahead here, when the shop was bought and you'd had the call to say things are go, getting it up and running, I know that was a really tough time for you in a lot of ways personally as well, with some things going on in terms of divorce, that side of thing, as well as presumably the pressure of trying to start a new business. How did you cope with all of that?
Well, it was quite a hectic time of my life, really. And so we got the keys to the shop in about September, and we opened the shop in March, and it was all go. Like, I left my previous job in about September as well, so I was kind of here at the start of the building work, having meetings left, right and centre. And I've basically, in the October, it all transpired that my wife was actually having an affair and had hid a gambling problem from me. And I was kind of facing, this kind of massive personal challenge. And basically it was at the time when I was trying to build a business and make a success of my life. And if I'm honest, she wasn't really on board with the business. She'd get quite frustrated when I was trying to, because I was working a full-time job, and I was trying to squeeze in the planning of this business at kind of any waking hour that I could. And I was trying to build a business for our future, and I think she would have been happy with someone that was kind of a 9-to-5 guy. But that said, it was a personal shock, and fortunately I was surrounded by a lot of really good people, including my business partner, who was very understanding. And I remember him sitting me down in his kitchen. He just kind of called this meeting with me, made me a cup of tea, and he's like, "James, you still want to go ahead with this?" And to be honest, Spokes was the thing that pulled me through that kind of tragedy, for want of a better word. And I had something really positive to focus on. And I threw myself into Spokes, and I went with total vigour. And we were, before we started this interview, we were talking a little bit about mental health, and it made me realise how fine a line we do walk, and how before that happened, if I'm totally honest, I'd see someone whose life had kind of crumbled around them, and I'd feel sorry for them, but I think that was, poor them kind of thing, and you look down on them a little bit. And I know it sounds like a really horrible thing to say, but when it kind of happens and you're like, oh my God, my whole world has just crumbled around me, had I not have had Spokes to grasp onto and run forward with, I can understand how people just like turn to drink or drugs, or just life just spirals out of control. And like, I can understand how close I was to that point. And fortunately, I had the right people around me and something really positive to focus on, and I didn't go down that rabbit hole. And I started dating pretty soon afterwards, and when I had loads of fun, and I met my now fiance. She was taking a career break to look after her 2 children. She was a single mum, and she was working in a cafe just down the road from Spokes. I was going in there having all these business meetings. I was deliberately timing them on days that she was in because I quite fancied her. And I remember just talking to her about, she's like, oh, you're the guy that's opening the bike shop, aren't you? And I was like, yeah. And it turns out that she had a huge retail background. And I never thought that from like this sort of calf worker. And I was like, that's pretty interesting. And she came in and she basically told me that I was doing everything wrong.
It's always a great way to start a relationship.
And had some really genuinely good ideas that I'd never have thought about. And we went on this first date, and the rest is kind of history. But a lot of the beginning of our relationship was actually having a Chinese in Spokes with a bottle of wine, and having a little bit of romance, and then knuckling down to do some work for 3 hours in the evening. And she's been a part of this journey since really day one. And we kind of got together in February just before we opened. And I remember 6 weeks into the Spokes journey, deciding to employ her after like dating for 2 months. And I think there was a lot of people around me that were a bit afraid to kind of say, what are you doing? But you know what, like I'm really blessed with that support. Like, she is a true partner, and she has this depth of retail experience and merchandising in particular, and she's very supportive at home. She understands the pressures that I face. She works in the business most days a week now. And obviously cares for the children in the afternoon and evening as well. And yeah, I kind of landed on my feet. I came out of this very dark place, decided to not be a victim about it, and went full force into Spokes and a new relationship. And it turned out it was exactly the right thing to do. And I think it's easy to get very depressed and kind of down when you're faced with a situation like that. But endurance sport, like the Ironman thing that I did, and some ultra runs and some long distance things that I've done, has taught me the perseverance and just trying to find a positive in every situation, and be that in your personal life or in work. Like I was just saying before we started again, that we actually had a bike stolen today, and that although it's a pretty rubbish thing to happen, I was really desperately trying to look at the positives of the situation. It's the first one that's happened in 3 years, and it's kind of an occupational hazard, really. And a lot of people do tend to focus on the negative aspects of any situation. And as American and as kind of hippie as it sounds, like I really believe in positive thinking and trying to turn a negative situation into a positive. And fortunately, that's what happened with Spokes.
And I have to say that I meet with a nutrition coach at the moment, and the one thing he does is, get on this. So I meet with him on Skype, and he's like, "How are you?" it's all gone horribly wrong, the world is falling to bits. And he said, so what was positive?
Yeah.
Like, nothing was positive. The whole thing was, but then he gradually makes me not so thinking, well, actually, I went and sat in a bike shop and chatted to a guy, and it was air conditioned.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, sorry, that isn't the only positive about the interview.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah.
But he does. He then makes me pull out the positive and to start going, oh, actually, no, you're right. That was good. And I'd forgotten that bit was good. And no, you're right. I did take a small step in the right direction. And it does change how I feel about it and how I feel about moving forward. So I think there is something about that positivity. And I think from what you've said to me so far in terms of Spokes as well, that you have had a lot of fortuitous is probably the wrong word, but just those hair on the back of your neck standing up things, which, that bad situation in terms of your wife and affair and gambling addiction, but then you met somebody who is actually perfect, who's perfect for you, your shop, your life, you and her life with the children. And so suddenly these things just coming together and, meeting David in the first, it was David, wasn't it? Yeah, in the first instance, and just how those came to be. And that sometimes things just happen, don't they?
I know, and I think, it amazes me sometimes, I'm nothing special. I just, I believe in interaction with people and just saying yes to opportunities now. And that period of my life it could have been a defining bad time, and I could have been a victim to it. I could be wallowing in self-pity and letting all sorts of bad things go through my mind, and I made a conscious choice not to, and I'm really glad I did. Now, it's not to say that there aren't challenges or hard days and times where you think, that was pretty rubbish, but I made a conscious decision to pick myself up and move on and make something positive of my life.
And is that something that, when you do have those bad days still, or something happens like the bike today, or, whatever it is, sometimes it's just that the day feels bad for whatever reason. Do you find that you take the same approach to that if you notice that you're starting to feel a little bit down, that you consciously choose to change your mood?
Yeah. And this is where things like running and cycling are really good for sort of your mental well-being, because when I do go and do the Wednesday runs with the boys, which I often still do, we often do 3 laps of a course, and it's really great to just, as an outlet, to release that emotion and kind of pent up stress, and I allow myself to be really annoyed and frustrated and negative for the first lap, and I consciously go round in a bad mood, and I'm just like, I'm running in a bit of anger, and I'm just thinking, oh, this is terrible, like, why has that happened? And the second lap, I look at the positives, and it's a very conscious thing. I run round and I'm thinking, okay, like, I've got this to be grateful for. This is going really right this week. I'm really looking forward to this, and just remembering all of the brilliant things I have in my life. And then on the third lap is an action lap for me. So I decide to find solutions for the problems that I had in my first lap. And it's quite an invigorating thing. And I didn't even realise I did it until a few months of doing it. And it became a really conscious thing. I just do 3 laps. One's a negative, one's a positive, and one's a kind of an action and change lap.
So your planning time is, so your body's doing one thing and freeing your head up to just think about all of those things.
Yeah, it's a good distraction, and you're focusing on, it's almost like meditation, where you're kind of freeing your mind and decluttering it, and like, it's one of the things that I really struggle with is just fatigue. Like, I'm doing 6 days a week most weeks at the moment, and we're on a thinner staff level than we've ever been, although fortunately I think that the staff that we've got here are the right staff, and we're quite efficient at what we do, and everybody's doing a bit above and beyond their kind of required tasks at the moment, but it's creating a great team dynamic. but it is meaning that we're all working out a little bit harder and working longer, and it is tiring. And I often come home and I'm pretty exhausted at the end of the day and feeling quite worn out. So I think one of the things that I really need to do is make a bit more time for relaxing and decluttering, and then obviously family time on top of that as well. So that's one of the things that I've really struggled with, and I find it as quite a challenge.
It can be really difficult, I think, to have that break. And also if you, I can't remember who told me this, but somebody who basically, when they were driving home, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it was, but they realized basically their life had been sort of one way. I think it was that they went to work, they commuted home, then came, obviously then went in and rejoined the family. And then it changed and they no longer had that commute. And she was finding it really stressful, and she finally realized that that time was the time that she'd used to unwind, to kind of clear her head, to be prepared. So she was ready to go in and be part of the family again and to be, participating in that. And if you don't recognize or create those windows, if you need them, it can be really difficult, because then it's almost like a pressure cooker where the tension is just building up, because you're never getting that little bit of what you need, which might be, actually, I'm just going to sit on the sofa with the kids next to me and watch a bit of TV, but I don't really want to talk.
Yeah.
I just need that.
And you're just there in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. And so finding the ways to give yourself those opportunities, whatever they are, whether it's the cycling or something else.
Well, Jen and the kids are down in Dorset for 3 weeks now, and I'm going down to see them for 3 days next week, which I'm really looking forward to. But I really learned to value and appreciate the time that we have together. And, compared to a lot of husband types, I'm barely there. But when I am there, I'm present, and I make a real point of, I've been telling the kids this story for 2 years now. It's just, we went to Spain a couple of years ago, and we forgot to take any reading books with us. So I started creating this story, and I've been telling it for 2 years. I'm going to make a film out of this one day. It's crazy. But I love those moments, just those precious moments with the children where you're just totally there and nothing else matters.
Yeah, and it's just the time. So one of the things that I do with my friends' children, so I've known them for 10 or so years now, and we got to a point where I said, actually, what I'd like to do on their birthdays is to take them out somewhere. So and now it's changed a little bit as they're getting older, that we'll probably go out with all three of them, but before it was that they have their day, and it's just that child and me, and we do whatever they want.
Oh, brilliant.
And then quite often we would end up in London, and so the rest of the family would join us for dinner or something, but it was just really nice that it was time with them.
Yeah.
And just really enjoying it. And then we also created, with the two younger ones, we have what we call the Edge.
Okay.
And the Edge is our restaurant. And we did a little logo, and we have aprons with our logo on it as well. And so what we do is, I normally will pick them up from school, and then they come back to my place, and we cook dinner, and then their parents and older sister come over for dinner.
Oh, brilliant.
But we've prepared, though I learned early on that there were certain things that actually you couldn't do 3 meals from scratch. By the end of the evening, I just kind of sat there going, oh my God. but again, it's about being there.
Definitely.
And having that time, which isn't about things. It's creating those memories, I guess, for all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is really lovely.
Well, I know that I'll come back from those 3 days in Dorset a different kind of tired.
No, that's true.
It's like I go there exhausted, and I come back even more exhausted. But it's a different kind of tired.
That's right. And you've had a relaxed time, kind of.
There's no relaxing.
My borrowed dog is on holiday in Dorset at the moment.
Brilliant.
And his owner said to me, she said, I've told my friends I am up for afternoon teas, siestas,
Wow.
going to the sea. She said, I'm not up for long walks. So she had a clear intention of how she was going to relax. Whether or not it's been realized, I do not know. So hopefully you'll get the relaxing that you want.
Hopefully.
Go.
Yeah, I'm going to demand a lion at least one day.
I'd go for 2.
The thing about kids is that they, on a school day, they don't get out of bed. But then on Saturdays and Sundays, 6 a.m. What's that about?
Yeah. But don't you find it's the same for you? If you don't have to go to work, that suddenly you're awake and alert and going, oh, I could get up and go do something.
Yeah.
But if you've got to go to work, and it's like, oh, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I need to sleep some more.
Yeah, I'm pretty bad in the mornings. I could be better in the mornings.
Mornings are not a strong point for me. And when you were saying about your 3 laps cycling, it reminded me of me driving to a breakfast meeting one day. And it started, well, to be honest, I thought it started at 7:30, but it turns out it starts at 7. So anyway, I'm on my way there for 7:30. and I'm driving along, and there's this guy in front of me, and he's got the, kind of the boy racer car.
Yeah.
Oh, does he have a boy racer car, and it's so loud, and by the time we get a bit further along, oh, it's kind of sweet that he's got his car, and it's kind of nice, he's obviously enjoying it. And I thought, when I look back, I thought, okay, I can see me waking up and getting, more into kind of the, the grumpy, why are you bothering me with the noise from this car?
Coffee is a very essential part of my day. Like, without it, I'm just not a functioning human being.
So basically, if the coffee machine's not working, don't come into the shop.
Yeah, don't.
Okay.
I'll just avoid it.
Yeah.
You'll get that great service I was talking to you about. That's out the window. Yeah.
So I'll be like, okay, yeah. No,
it's like faulty towers in here with that coffee.
So what led you to becoming, to applying for the IOD Director of the Year in 2017? And how did it feel to put yourself up there for that? And did you put yourself up there?
Well, to this day, it's still a mystery to me. I got nominated for that award, and I genuinely do not know who put me forward for it. And I got an email through from the IOD, and if I'm totally honest, I'd maybe distantly heard about them, but I didn't really know who they were or what they were about. And there's something that compelled me to open this email. And you get a few of these things, you've won this, and sort of Nigerian princesses and various other unbelievable things. And this looked pretty legit. And I remember opening this email, I thought, this looks pretty good. And I'd recently won a couple of other sort of more regional awards, like Surrey Heath's Best New Business and things like that. So I kind of thought, all right, I'll fill this out. And the application form was relentless. It was just, it was like this multi-page document with all of your intimate personal history and financial data. And I remember being quite intimidated by the process. And so I'd applied for it, and I didn't really think anything more of it. And I got this phone call saying, this is so-and-so from the IOD. I'm really pleased to say that you've been shortlisted. And I was like, okay, that's pretty exciting. And so I think I told someone that I knew and respected, and he's like, the IOD, that's a pretty big deal, James. And I was like, really? And I didn't really know much about it. And I started Googling it, and I was like, that's quite a prestigious organisation. And so I went through, and I did a couple of telephone interviews, and then I was finally invited as a finalist along to the headquarters in Pall Mall, as I say. My partner will tell you that is Pall Mall, and that's an argument that rages within our house. And I'm
Canadian, so I'm not going to get involved.
Yeah. Okay, so Ball is B-A-L-L, right?
It is.
Paul is B-A-L-L. P-A-L-L.
Yes, but then you've got Paul, which is P-A-U-L, and that can't sound like ball. I'm confusing myself.
No, you're helping my argument here. Thank you. Anyway, we're getting sidetracked.
We are getting sidetracked.
So, I threw on a tux and went with David, my business partner, and our respected others, and went to this amazing, lavish dinner and awards at the HQ. And it is such an incredible place. And I really had, to be honest, I didn't understand the gravitas of this award and the organisation, and I just had a gut feeling that I was going to win it, and I don't know why that was. Like, there were so many other very deserving people there, really ultra high achieving people, and my name was called up, and it was just one of the most magical moments of my life. Like, I just like, how did this happen? Like, I've opened a bike shop in Surrey, and there was CEOs of massive global banks there, and some multi-million pound companies, billion-pound companies there. And there's me with my bike shop in Surrey collecting this award on stage, and it was just quite a surreal moment. And I decided to join the IOD because I really like what they do, and they are an organisation that's as much about giving back as it is kind of being a prestigious, kind of influential platform. So I hope to do a bit more with them. I'm interested in their kind of chartered directorships, and I've got a long road ahead of me with Spokes, but I've got a couple of other business opportunities that are presenting themselves at the moment. And then eventually, when I do look to exit the Spokes journey in many years' time, I'd like to take some non-executive director positions and try some new challenges in perhaps even in the corporate world, and see if I can apply some of my director skills from a small business to a bigger platform.
Because I think there's a lot of scope. I think businesses now, the bigger businesses, are starting to realize that if they can react more quickly and be more personal almost as well, that there are things that they can learn, as opposed to it being the more traditional, the big corporate person comes and tells the small business how to do it. And I think the IOD as well is definitely trying to change. So they did have very much a reputation or a feel for, which was very old, which was very, somebody trying to FaceTime me now. So we've had interruptions from FaceTime people.
Yeah.
But, very much the CEOs, the very senior, and they're trying to very much reach out now to the younger directors, and younger not necessarily in age, but in terms of business experience, starting up businesses, which means you could be whatever age you are, but your business is quite small. So it's quite nice to see them starting to evolve and move.
It is brilliant, and I was very honoured to be asked back as a judge of this year's awards. And I gave an award to someone called Amy Golding, and she's at the age of 31. She's the CEO of a $100 million a year company.
Wow.
And I was honoured to be there. I was just really humbled. There's staggering achievers around you, and I love what they do, and I'd like to give something back to entrepreneurs that are trying to get a break and be in the same position as me now in a few years' time, that I can help. Yeah.
And do you think so apart from making you aware of the IOD, and also, I guess opening your eyes to the wide range of things that they do you think that the award and that exposure to them has impacted you in other ways? Do you think it's changed anything that's happened with Spokes, or even if it's giving you confidence of the knowledge that people do respect what you're doing?
I think Jen will tell you that my ego's got a little big.
The doors have to be widened.
No, but in all seriousness, it has given me some confidence. And, I walk into a room full of high achievers, and they treat me as someone as their equal. And, often I didn't feel like they're equal. I felt like, I'm at the start of my journey. I'm a complete rookie here. And I feel like I'm deserving some respect, or earning some respect from some people that I really have nothing but adoration and respect for. So it's making me walk a little taller and feel like I'm deserving more of a place at the business table. But it's made me really reflect upon my journey and just how remarkable the whole thing has been, and how I've got this great picture of me standing in Spokes when it was just a building site, and they'd cleared everything out of here. There was just a concrete floor, nothing on the walls. I was stood in the middle of this blank canvas, and to have gone from that point to winning an IOD award is just remarkable, really. And it's made me very grateful for the whole experience and everybody I've met along the way. And it's just made me more compelled to try and help and inspire other people who want to achieve their goals. And I'm nowhere near to achieving my goals yet. Like, I've got a long way to go, not just in the business and financial sense. Like, there's a lot of personal goals that I want to achieve. And the journey is really only just beginning. So watch this space.
I will. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure.
So we've covered a lot.
We have.
And so just before we wrap up, is there anything that maybe you'd like to share with other, aspiring business owners, people who are starting out or who are facing challenges?
Run for the hills.
Well, actually, shouldn't it be cycle for the hills?
No, I'm kidding. Like, it's honestly the most rewarding thing that you can do. And like we were saying earlier, with the parameters of this kind of fixation of where we perceive we should be, because of others' influence and the kind of society pressures on us, when you break out of that and you become your own boss and the master of your own destiny, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but the most rewarding. And if you're prepared for a challenge and you're prepared for some hard work, some disappointment, some setbacks, some obstacles, some hurdles, and you're prepared to fight all of those things head on, then the rewards are massive. And I'm not just talking financial, I'm talking the sense of achievement and the other opportunities that open themselves up along the way, and the people that you meet, and just the feeling that you get from yourself and the confidence that you get out of it. And the things that you'd never have dreamed, the situations and the abilities that you get off the back of just saying yes and betting on yourself. Even when everybody around you doesn't think it's possible, if you have that inner fire and that belief that you can do it, then you should go for it. And that's, just run with it and enjoy every second of the journey.
That is really wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I've been in conversation with James Thompson, Managing Director of Spokes of Bagshot, IOD Director of the Year 2017. If you'd like to speak to James, you can contact him at spokesofbagshot.com. You can also find all of his details on the show notes associated with this podcast. The number of people listening to podcasts is increasing year on year as people look to break free from their screen and consume information on the go. If you'd like to know more about podcasts, then please go to whatsthisIhear.bridginggaps.uk. Are you considering your own podcast? Why not check out So You Think You Want Your Own Podcast? It's an online course that introduces you to everything that's involved in hosting a podcast, as well as working with you to define your own podcast concept. You can get more information on it at startyourownpodcast.bridginggaps.uk. Bridging Gaps, the business podcast, was produced by Deborah Levitt of Bridge Road Consultants Limited, with original music provided by Pete
You've been
Dineley.
listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the business podcast.